You're about to see every NBA team's best moment this decade. 5 organizations won championships. Some took steps in the right direction but couldn't get over the hump. And then there's the teams that completely failed to stay relevant. Stay tuned for every single one. First, Zamers gets the shout out, predicting a breakout year for De'Aaron Fox, including all defense-like stats and an All-Star appearance. I predicted we'll see him in the All-Star game last vid. Go check out that video after this one. For next video shout out, leave your take on tonight's question. LeBron promised 8 championships, but 4 straight finals appearances and 2 titles legitimize what he did in Miami and his Heat legacy. Ray Allen hit one of the clutchest shots in NBA history, and while people try to use that shot to discredit LeBron's 2013 title, here's why there's a hole in that argument. In the fourth quarter of Allen's Game 6 dagger, James scored 16 points on 7 of 11 shooting. He came into that game averaging 31, 10, and 6 in elimination games, and with his legacy on the line again, and Skip Bayless ready to call him a choker, Bron put up 32 points, 10 rebounds, and a series-high 11 assists, followed by a Game 7 where he carried Miami yet again with 37 points and 5 threes, including some clutch ones down the stretch, to win Miami back-to-back championships. Right at the end of the Steve Nash and Amari Stoudemire era in the first year of this decade, the 7 seconds or less Mike D'Antoni-led Phoenix Suns got 2 wins from the NBA Finals in 2010. They kept it extremely close against the reigning champion Lakers, coming up short in Game 5 on the road by just 2 points and rallying from down 17 to get within 5 points in the fourth quarter of Game 6. Ultimately, they came up short. They competed for a playoff spot with an old Steve Nash in 2011 and 12 after letting go of an injury-ridden Amari Stoudemire in 2010 free agency to the Knicks. But then when Steve joined the Lakers in 2012 free agency, the Suns' rebuild was officially on. Ryan McDonough was hired as their GM in 2013. Other than drafting Booker and winning the draft lottery in 2018 to draft Ayton, he ran the franchise into the ground. Still a great playoff run in 2010, but recently they got rid of McDonough, so that's one of the top moments this decade. So good times should be coming for Suns fans in the 2020s without Ryan. Comprised of a prime, lethal post-up threat from any area, Dirk Nowitzki, surrounded by an aging Jason, Kidd, and Terry, a 28-year-old 7-1 shot-blocking beast in Tyson Chandler, and lockdown wing Sean Marion, the Dallas Mavs had a miracle run to win the 2011 championship. After being the 3 seed in the regular season, no one expected them to get all the way to the finals, and of course in those finals they were heavily underestimated. But Dirk's averages of 26 and 11 in that series, combined with a scrappy Mavs squad, took down the hyped Heat Big Three, who promised 1960 Celtic-like dominance. Dallas had made 6 fourth-quarter comebacks before the finals, and eventually, that heart won them their first ever championship. So maybe the best underdog story of any champion this decade. A process that was trusted has led to back-to-back second-round exits to the Celtics and Raptors. Luckily for Philly fans, new GM and former NBA big Elton Brand has proved to be an excellent executive, the opposite of the incompetent former president Brian Colangelo. Meanwhile, the man who tore it down for better days, Sam Hinkie, would be proud of the acquisitions of Al Horford and Josh Richardson to surround Embiid and Simmons, and the re-signing of Tobias Harris as well. The 2020 Sixers are set up for another run at a finals appearance. They were damn close to beating Toronto in the conference semis. I think they'll make a conference finals appearance, potentially more, next year. Let's flash back to long before Isaiah's career-diminishing hip injury and Boston dealing with a drama-filled, injury-prone Kyrie Irving, who shot just 35% from the field in the second round of the playoffs. 5'8" Isaiah Thomas carried a Celtics team that was supposed to be rebuilding when he got there, all the way to the conference finals, averaging over 27 points in the second round against the Wizards, including scoring 33 points, tragically after his sister passed away in a car accident. Then, on the date of birth of his late sister, China Thomas, May 2nd, he scored an inspiring 53 points. The Celtics also made the 2010 finals, which is their most successful moment in the last 10 years, but the story of Isaiah, without a doubt, is the best for Boston. 2 individuals are the primary factors that led to Toronto's shining moment of the decade and in franchise history. Kawhi Leonard, of course, but also the man who got him there and built the championship foundation, Masai Ujiri. The top acquisitions of the best executive in basketball at the moment, Masai Ujiri, could be covered endlessly since he was hired in the summer of 2013. Another video itself could be made on the perfect and timely moves he's made in his Raptors tenure. Then there's Kawhi, who I honestly just want to thank as a Raptor fan for accepting an unfamiliar situation and consistently coming through when we needed you the most in the playoffs. The rings are what any fan wants at the end of the day, and even though my Raptors are without Kawhi or DeRozan, there's still a pretty bright future in my opinion for a well-built squad and a committed GM in Masai Ujiri. Derrick Rose led Chicago to the #1 seed in the 2010-11 season, going down to a Heat team that had way too much star power for them in the Eastern Finals, but this was an extremely young, defensively dominant Bulls team that everyone assumed would be a challenger going into the future in the Eastern Conference. Unfortunately, Derrick's 2012 ACL tear and consistent knee injuries season after season changed his reputation from superstar to injury-prone. He did hit a monumental game winner to put the Bulls up 2-1 in the East semis against LeBron in 2015, but after 66 games of average play in the 2015-16 season, Rose was traded to the Knicks. Chicago fell into mediocrity and then into a bottom feeder for the 2020 Bulls. Levine and Markkanen are great young pieces to build around. Their future should be bright. Blake and CP3 failed to make a conference finals in their 6 playoff appearances together. They choked a 3-1 conference semifinals lead to the Rockets in 2015 after leading by double digits at home in a closeout Game 5. Then they lost back-to-back years in the first round, creating what was known as the Clipper curse. Luckily, Kawhi Leonard wanted to come home, and he convinced Paul George to request a trade there. And just like that, luck has reversed for this franchise. The formerly named LeBronto Raptors were given the Kawhi effect, and the unlucky Clippers are about to get the same thing. Detroit moving Tobias Harris, who'd have probably have left in free agency by now, and a couple draft picks for Blake Griffin was their shining moment of the decade by far. Former coach and GM Stan Van Gundy took a risk, and it was one of the few moves that paid off for him. The Pistons made the playoffs in their first full season with Griffin. Blake averaged a career-high 24 points per game, and despite another knee injury, his ball handling, three-point shooting, and post-up game are as good as they've ever been in his career, and he's still just 30 years old. So Detroit can build up their roster around BG for the next coming years. In 2013 and 14, the Eastern Conference was a 2-team race between the Heat and the Indiana Pacers behind a young, athletic beast in Paul George. What got Indiana one win from a spot in the finals in 2013 was their overwhelming defense, powered by the elite rim protection and over 2.5 blocks a game of Roy Hibbert, met up top by the laterally quick and physically strong George Hill, and locked down on the wing by the pest that became Lance Stevenson, along with PG's athleticism. This team could have been a champion easily. It's too bad they were living in an era where LeBron became every team in the East's daddy. Oladipo and Brogdon, I consistently mentioned, are going to be dominant next season. Miles Turner and Sabonis have a ton of value as well, so I like the future of Larry Bird's Pacers. A phenom was stolen in 2013, and the alphabet, Greek freak, MVP, Kawhi's son, whatever you want to call him, he's maybe the example of front offices not doing their homework and relying on pre-draft rankings. But honestly, selecting Adetokounmpo was a risk taken by the Bucks even at such a late pick. After his rookie year, the number 15 spot in the draft seemed like a fair spot for him to be picked with averages of just 6 points a night. He was extremely raw in his all-around ability, and it was clear he needed a few more years in the pros to fully develop, and it did take a few years, but now he's an MVP. He's already saying he wants more and wants to be better, recently saying he's only at 60% of his full potential, which is a dangerous attitude for small forwards all across the NBA. Before tearing their team apart to draft a young core with potential of John Collins, Trae Young, and Kevin Huerter, the Hawks shocked the world under the now Bucks head coach Mike Budenholzer. They became known as the Spurs of the East with their team play and three-point shooting, as no Hawk averaged more than 17 points per game in their 60-win 2014-15 season. 4 out of 5 players in their starting lineup of Jeff Teague, Kyle Korver, Al Horford, DeMarre Carroll, and Paul Millsap shockingly became All-Stars. They went 17-0 in January and went all the way to the conference finals, where they ran into who else but LeBron James. Still a dream season for Atlanta fans, who saw Kyle Korver shoot nearly 50% from three-point range and light up the then known as Phillips Arena. If one moment describes this decade for the Charlotte Hornets, it's LeBron staring down their owner Michael Jordan mid-dunk. MJ's tenure with the formerly known as Bobcats, who had the worst record in NBA history, to the now Hornets, who've maintained mediocrity on their overall roster around their all-star Kemba Walker, of course now former all-star Kemba Walker, who recently left them in the dust and made Jordan think he had to give Terry Rozier close to $20 million a season. Who knows how long it takes Charlotte to escape the NBA's dweller with the GOAT at the top of their organization. It wasn't that long ago that the Magic were in the dweller themselves, but solid signings of Fournier and Vucevic early in the 2010s and draft picks Aaron Gordon and Jonathan Isaac paid off in 2019 as they ended their playoff drought, which had extended until 2012 before their return this year. The Dwight Howard era ended with a solid showing in 2010, getting 2 wins from back-to-back finals appearances. 2019's appearance wasn't anything like that. It was a quick and painless trip to the playoffs against the eventual champions. But the value of playoff experience guarding Kawhi is going to be huge for guys like Jonathan Isaac and Aaron Gordon. Hopefully they can take the next step towards stardom next season, as well as the 6th pick in 2018's draft, Mo Bamba. He missed his entire rookie season with injury. It'll be interesting to see if he can bounce back. Wizards fans' peak this decade was witnessing a young, uninjured, and adequately paid John Wall and Bradley Beal get them to the second round in 2015, sweeping Toronto in the first round, with Paul Pierce hitting daggers all over the place, which continued against Atlanta as he hit this shot to put the Wiz up 2-1. Then the quote he had post-game is legendary to this day. Then in 2017, Washington beat Atlanta in the first round to face Boston in the second round, getting back to round 2 again, where they ended up losing in 7 games to Isaiah Thomas and the Celtics. In that Game 7, John Wall shot 1 of 8 from three-point range and 8 of 23 overall from the field. On the other hand, Bradley Beal was the only thing keeping them in that game, with 38 points, making 12 of his 22 shots. Fast forward to the present, and John Wall's going to miss the entirety of the 2019-20 season, reportedly, with his recovery from his torn Achilles. Clearly, he's not moving quickly in his recovery. He'll be 30 by the time he comes back, and the Wall and Beal era could be looked back on for Washington as a team that just couldn't come through. After their conference finals appearance with Melo in 2009, from 2010 to 13, the Nuggets lost in the first round 4 years in a row, even though they received a good return in the 2010-11 season with the Melo trade. Then in 2015, Denver robbed the future of their franchise and 2019 All-Star at the 41st selection in Nikola Jokic. With Jamal Murray, Gary Harris, and other key role players like Malik Beasley and Monte Morris all being picked by Denver in the draft, their front office, with Tim Connolly running the show as president since 2017 and GM since 2013, is gaining a damn good reputation. Denver's built a powerhouse with their incredibly deep young squad, so despite coming up 1 win short of reaching the conference finals last year, it's been a productive 2010s for Denver. Winning the 2015 NBA draft lottery and picking Towns after Jahlil Okafor was in the running to be the first pick in the draft is the biggest success of the past 10 years for the usually unimpressive Minnesota Timberwolves. Okafor went on to be a fringe NBA player and a complete bust at pick number 3, while Towns won Rookie of the Year, was All-NBA third team in 2018, and is a reigning 2-time All-Star. Minnesota snuck into the playoffs in 2018 to snap their NBA-leading 14-season playoff drought. A lot of that had to do with Jimmy Butler, and it's become evident that Towns needs the roster around him to get upgraded. It wouldn't hurt if his defense improved as well. Their other first overall pick they traded for Kevin Love, Andrew Wiggins, hasn't lived up to expectations at all. We'll see if the 2020s will be a better decade for Minnesota fans. Just 1 finals appearance would have been predicted by 0 Thunder fans after they lost to Miami in 5 games, 7 years ago in 2012. But things fell apart after their decision to re-sign Serge Ibaka instead of future generational scorer to be the Beard James Harden. The highlight of the 2010s was their run through the Western Conference, winning 4 straight games against San Antonio in the West Finals after going down 2-0. Then OKC won Game 1 of the Finals, and even when they ultimately lost the next 4 games, it was this moment where the 3 future MVPs were huddled up watching LeBron win his first ring that everyone assumed this young team would be a serious problem for a very long time. They got back a washed-up Daquan Cook, Kevin Martin, soon to be traded to Charlotte, Jeremy Lamb, and picks in 2013, the only significant one being Steven Adams, who's still their center to this day, of course. Looking back on it, Houston absolutely stole James Harden. Durant would snake Westbrook in 2016. Ibaka moved to Orlando for Oladipo, who was eventually moved for PG. PG became the second superstar wing to ditch Russ, and then, of course, Russ was the next piece to go. For flawlessly bettering their roster around a developing, injury-prone Steph Curry from 2011 and on, drafting a now 5-time All-Star Klay Thompson at pick number 11, stealing 2017's Defensive Player of the Year at pick number 35 in 2012, and then making highly impressive free agent signings, to say the least. Bob Myers, Warriors GM, deserves a ton of credit for all that. He was promoted in only 12 months to GM after being hired as assistant in April of 2011, and it's no coincidence elite decision-making has came from the front office since then. The worst moment for any fans other than Golden State was watching them sign Durant, being that they had just won 73 games the last season. So I guess you could say the Durant moment is their top moment of the decade, other than the 3 rings, of course. To kick off the 2010s, over 9 years ago, Kobe Bryant averaged nearly 30 points, 6 assists, while grabbing 6 boards a game. Around Kobe, the 2010 Lakers featured a prime Pau Gasol, 2011 Sixth Man of the Year stretch big Lamar Odom, up-and-coming post-up and shot-blocking threat Andrew Bynum, and 3-and-D goon Ron Artest at small forward. The Kobe-Howard-Nash tandem was a nightmare, and it led to a rebuilding stretch, but an unforgettable flashback in the midst of that was who else but Kobe, dropping 60 in his last game ever to lead a Laker comeback against Utah. Despite not reaching the playoffs since 2013, signing LeBron and recently getting Anthony Davis around him were pretty damn good moments in a rare decade of losing for the 16-time champion Laker organization. For a second, I'll ask you to forget about the playoff disappointments and fights with Chris Paul, because the man who put up the most points per game since Michael Jordan was essentially moved for Steven Adams, as I just mentioned, who's very solid, don't get me wrong, and underrated. Harden's become the greatest scorer of the last 10 years, though. GM Daryl Morey's reputation should permanently be as a top executive for robbing the Thunder of the Beard services. With a limited injury history and still just 30 years old, his generational shot creating will allow him to compete for a title year in, year out. Maybe shockingly, hiring recently inducted Hall of Famer Vlade Divac as their GM back in 2015 is the Kings' best moment of the decade, just because in 3 seasons since hiring him, Sacramento only has a record of 98 and 148 so far. The roster he was given to start with an unhappy DeMarcus Cousins at the forefront was completely in shambles. For their disgruntled 3-time All-Star at the time, Boogie in 2017, most notably they received Buddy Hield, who just averaged 20 points for them and was 5th in three-point percentage among guards in 2018-19. In the 2017 summer, just after trading their franchise player, they drafted De'Aaron Fox with the 5th pick in the draft, so Divac had acquired his backcourt for years to come in just 4 months. Hield and Fox, with the help of Vlade's 2018 number 2 pick Marvin Bagley III, who was named to the all-rookie first team, the Kings won the most games of the decade by 6 games, topping 2016's 33 wins. Sacramento's fans have had to sit through rebuild after rebuild, but with the impressive new core in place, the 2020 should be a much better decade for them, and for that they can thank Vladdy. The grit and grind big three of the crafty, quick Mike Conley running the show at point guard, with a prime mid to late 20s Marc Gasol on one block, and maybe the best pure post scorer, bucket getter in all of basketball, the now retired Zach Randolph. The Grizzlies were nothing to be messed with back in the day. The Grizz management moved on to a new core, which revolves around stretch big men Jaren Jackson and soon-to-be rookie phenom Ja Morant, but the era in Memphis they just had was fairly successful. The ring eludes them like many teams, but a conference finals appearance and 7 straight playoff appearances from 2011 to 17 in the far tougher conference is a solid accomplishment. Conley, Gasol, and Randolph is one of the better big threes this decade. However, they never had a proper 13 other players on their depth chart to compete with the flashier, more loaded NBA teams. Tony Allen's like the best player Memphis had other than their big three off the top of my head for all those years. So what these three accomplished is even more special when you take that into account. The brow leading the Pels back to the postseason back in 2015 signified, at least at the time, the success of the 2011-12 New Orleans Pelicans' tanking efforts to land him and their rebuild in general. It turned out that the Pelicans would only get back to the playoffs one more time in AD's tenure, which was in 2018, where they swept the Portland Trail Blazers in the first round. Rajon Rondo and Drew Holiday locked down Damian Lillard, Anthony Davis put up beastly numbers, and everything was right in the world for hoops fans in the Big Easy. A 22-year-old Kawhi Leonard forced LeBron into almost 4 turnovers per game, including 7 Bron giveaways in Game 3 of the 2014 Finals. On offense, he flashed the fundamentally sound shooting repertoire that would soon take the leap into elite by averaging nearly 60% from three-point range and from the field overall. He was a big weapon in the Spurs' space and pace 5-game embarrassment of a banged-up Heat team. It won San Antonio their 4th championship this century and first and ultimately only in the 2010s. The all-time easy first-ballot Hall of Fame career of Tim Duncan had its moments this decade with 4 All-Star appearances, but he wasn't his dominant 2000 self, and the legend retired at the right time. Before getting beat by the Rockets in 2 consecutive series, it was Donovan Mitchell's coming out party and a mauling of a Carmelo-based Thunder team for the Utah Jazz. D-Mitch averaged 28 points on 46% shooting in their 6-game series win. Specifically, Jazz fans are going to tell you the highlight of the decade was watching Mitchell hit 5 3-pointers and score 38 points in Utah's closeout Game 6 at home. It's been amazing to see the prominence of Utah's bounce back as an organization since losing Gordon Hayward to free agency. Rudy Gobert became the Defensive Player of the Year and probably the most dominant NBA rim protector. They've got their phenom to build around for the future in Donovan, and Quinn Snyder's proved to be an excellent hiring. The 2020s ended with 3 straight playoff appearances, considering how it ended a very solid stretch of 10 years. 2014's 7-game series win over an inexperienced young Raptors squad highlighted an underwhelming decade in terms of postseason success for the Brooklyn Nets. Despite that, in the midst of placing 6th in the East last season, Brooklyn's young core, along with a very solid coach in Kenny Atkinson, impressed free agents, the top ones to be specific, Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, proving to be the team Irving was talking about when he said 2 max spots to KD in this video. So the Nets end the decade by becoming the far better and more marketable New York NBA team. Based off Durant's limited major injury history, I think he returns to full strength for the 2020-21 season, and then Brooklyn has as much championship potential as any team in the league. Karis LeVert's a scary third option for your future, and role players like Spencer Dinwiddie, Joe Harris, and Jared Allen are no joke. Their recent free agency tops the list of anything, though, in this 10-year span. Klay Thompson had this to say about LeBron after taking a 3-1 lead in the 2016 Finals.
I guess his feelings just got hurt.
Then Cleveland embarrassed Golden State in games 5 and 6 with 15 and 14-point wins at Quicken Loans Arena, took a plane to the Bay, played a back-and-forth game with the 73-win Warriors, and in the clutch, LeBron's chase-down block out of nowhere on Andre Iguodala and Uncle Drew's pull-up in Curry's face sealed the historically great comeback. Curry and the 73-win Warriors were memed and made fun of in comment sections all over the internet. LeBron and the city of Cleveland were taken as seriously by the general public as ever before. It's crazy to think that it only took 1 year after this monumental year for the Cavs for the Kyrie and LeBron duo to split up. It's safe to say 2016 was the greatest year in Cleveland sports history. The Cavs became the first NBA team ever to erase a 3-1 deficit in the NBA Finals, beating the best regular season team ever 3 straight times. It's a run that'll never be forgotten. The opposite's the case for the decade from the James Dolan-run New York Knicks, where the biggest triumph was their 2013 second-round exit to the Indiana Pacers. In that series, Carmelo played his part, putting up 28 points and 8 boards. Sadly, New York's best scorer was J.R. Smith, who didn't shoot 29% from the field. An aged and withered Amari Stoudemire didn't see the floor even 10 minutes a night and averaged under 4 points a game. Also in that series, Jeremy Lin's replacement, starting point guard Raymond Felton, was 1 of 8 from the field in Game 3 and 0 of 7 overall with 2 points in 33 minutes. If New York's roster around a prime scoring great like Carmelo was properly built, then they would have had a lot more success. After the Dwight Howard, James Harden-led 2014 Rockets secured a 2-point lead with 0.9 seconds on the clock in Game 6 of their first-round series, the now overpaid Chandler Parsons got lazy guarding Lillard, completely loses him without even a screen being executed, and his deadly quick release, Lillard I'm talking about, made the entire Houston team pay for the Parsons mistake. The Rockets season ended with 1 shot, and 5 years later, the same would happen to OKC. This time from an insane distance that Paul George claimed as lucky. Damian Lillard ended the winning era in OKC with a nasty bomb to add to his clutch legacy. Dame time is the clear highlight of the decade for Portland, but they also just made the conference finals, getting past the tough young Denver team. We'll see if their all-star backcourt can get over the hump in the early 2020s. For hoops stories, lists, and predictions all year, be sure to hit subscribe. The shoutout question is, what's the most memorable moment from any NBA team in the 2010s? This was your boy Dflow. Thanks a ton for tuning in. Have a great one. I'll see you next video.